Hi everyone, it's Jeremy at Sasson House, Cabrillo College again, and I just wanted the dough's almost mixed out the focaccia dough that I'm making in a previous video, and I just wanted to show you that assessment of the development of gluten. So if I take some of this out again, so one kind of correction from the last video, you can see this dough is sticking to the side of the bowl. And again, with lower hydration doughs where you're expecting them to hold their shape, one of the assessments when it comes to hydration is that you're looking to make sure that it's not sticking to the side to the bowl. It might stick on the bottom, but not on the sides. That's kind of indicating to you that it's got some flow to it, some liquidity to the dough, and in doughs where we want to hold the shape, we don't want that. That's too wet. You won't be able to really work with them well. It's too much water. And so in that case, I would add more flour. So if I was making a baguette or an olive loaf or something like that, then I would have added more flour to this dough. But being that this is a very high hydration dough, again, you'll see when I get to the shaping part, there isn't really forming other than me stretching it out in a sheet pan, so it's not holding its shape when we're making focaccia. So little correction on what I had talked about before when the proper hydration. Also note the hydration I assess, even though I've got a recipe, and also the development of gluten I assess, even though I've got a time on the recipe. So this one now has been mixing for about 10 minutes, a little bit more, and it's still a little bit underdeveloped. So notice how there's some human assessment involved in making this, a couple of areas of making this one dough. So even though you have a recipe, it doesn't mean you just follow the recipe and everything's going to be hunky-dory, because things aren't like that in cooking. There's many things that we need to have experience and been trained on how to assess whether something is the way we want it. It's like, how much salt do you add to something you're making? You could have a recipe and it could tell you the amount, but really in the end you need to taste it to figure out, does it need more, or have I put too much salt and I need to dilute things out. So very similar here in making the dough. So I'm going to pull some out, and I'm going to use some flour to do that because this is such a sticky dough. And I just put some of it in flour so I can handle it, otherwise it's just going to stick to me. And if I take that dough that I took out, and I'm going to do the same thing that we did before at the beginning, and I take this, and first you want to just kind of get it thin, so I just let it kind of stretch in my hand a bit. And then if I take this and I start to stretch, you can see it tear over here by my left hand, your right, but you can see it's also getting thin, and you can almost see light through it and a little bit of webbing in it, and that is that gluten developing, but it's still tearing a little bit more than I'd like it to, so I'm going to mix it longer. And once I get that mixed out, when I say that, I mean once the gluten is developed properly, I'm going to take that, I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on top of it, and I'm going to put it in the proof box. If I needed this mixer to make something else, then I would transfer it into a vessel that I can let it proof in. So oftentimes I might just use, you can see some of those plastic containers back there. So we have larger ones that I could put a larger dough like this into, and I just put some olive oil in there so I can get it back out pretty easily, because again, this is a wet dough, so it sticks to just about anything. And we're going to use olive oil on it anyway when we go to bake it off. And then I would proof it, and that's bulk proofing. And what we're looking for when we proof it is about doubling in size. And depending on the temperature of the dough that we made, that can take anywhere from 40 minutes maybe on the short end to an hour and 15 minutes if everything was cool in the dough. So I'm making the dough right now. I'm going to bake them off now, or when they're ready. And so I don't want it to take longer. So I used warm water. Warm water will help that yeast be more active. And that way I have a warm dough that when I put in the proof box is going to proof faster. If we didn't want to make the focaccia today, which you can do, I could make this dough with cold water and then refrigerate it overnight and then take it back out and allow it to proof from cold. You could do that as well. That's called retarding a dough, and it takes longer to do it because it's going to take a little while for that dough to warm back up and for that yeast to get active. Sometimes when doughs are retarded like that, it's not a bad idea to take them out, mix them in the mixer a little bit, add a little bit of flour to it, maybe even a little sugar, try and get that yeast kind of sped up a little bit so that that proofing goes a little faster. And so after I bulk proof it, then I'm going to do another video where I'll take it out of the proof box, show you that it proofed, and then I'm going to scale it. In this case, this dough, we put about 3 pounds of dough in a half sheet pan and stipple it. So again, that's this method of stretching it and making it fill the whole pan. You do that with your fingers, so it ends up with all these dents in it, and that's why focaccia looks like it does. And then I'll proof it again, and that will allow that yeast to become active again and to create air pockets inside that dough, and then I can cook it off, and then I'll bake it off, and we'll get this nice browned, fluffy focaccia that is great for sandwiches and other uses. So stay tuned for another video.